agenda is review of the second quarter police report. There have been some internet issues at the police station, so Chief Slar is en route home to join us later, and we'll skip over that and bring it back at the end. So we'll move right to the abatement program update with Mr. Gum.
Monsieur Gum.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I will share my screen and let me know if for some reason it's not working, but I will get going on the abatement program. So tonight, what I wanted to do is go through the abatement program, give you a little bit of update on 2019, 2020, and then kind of where we're at, the current state with abatements. So
we can't see your screen if you have already started sharing.
I will figure out why I didn't share screen. One more time. Share screen. Should. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Good job.
I can hear you now.
Have an interesting night with computers apparently. So yeah, I'll kind of go through where we were and where we are with the abatement program. It's an interesting year to say the least. We made a little bit of progress, not as much as I would typically like to see in a typical year, but this is not a typical year. So the current status, last year in 2019, we completed 14 projects, 13 dangerous building, 1 nuisance. We had really, really good compliance, and we continue to have good compliance. 12 of those were completed by the owner. We were only obligated to complete 2 of those. This year, we've moved on 11 projects. 9 were dangerous building, 2 were nuisance properties, and all of those properties this year have been completed by the owner. We have 17 projects pending, mostly dangerous building, a couple of nuisances, and there's a few other nuisances that will be trickling in from the police department that I've heard of recently. So all in all, we haven't done that many, but I think the word is out when Lakewood posts a property that I think we mean business, and it seems like the homeowners are all starting to comply. It's kind of a nice thing to have. So a map of the city of Lakewood. There's not quite as many dots on it as I would like, but you can see kind of where we've completed projects in 19. Most of the projects in 19, there's a cluster kind of down in the 146th area that are all clumped together. So you're not necessarily seeing them all because there was a bunch on top of either of each other. Fairly consistent from what I've seen in years past. The Springbrook, Tillicum, Woodbrook tend to have the most downtown. Around the 101st area tends to have a few. And then Lake City, the last couple of years has expanded a little bit more, and we've done more in that neighborhood. Something that I wanted to show, see if there was anything. I pulled abatement projects for the last 5 years. Tried to see if there was any trends or anything that was kind of out there that I could track. Everything was fairly consistent. There wasn't a lot of differential from one project to the next, from one year to the next. Commercial properties to single family properties. Most every year we had, in that 5-year cycle, 15 to present, we've always had 6 to 8 commercial projects. The rest have been single family projects. This year, the scope, this year and last year, the scope of commercial projects is kind of a little bit larger than what we've had in the past, but the numbers are fairly consistent. So the things that I thought were interesting, the blue obviously shows the total number of projects completed. Red is the owners that have completed them. And as a percentage, I mean, the red is catching up. So owners are starting to step up, and we've seen good compliance. The things that kind of jumped out at me that I saw when I was running numbers were squatters, fires, and bank owned. One, I assumed there was going to be a little bit more of a contingent of bank owned properties, and I hadn't seen that. So I was kind of amazed that bank owned properties have kind of been on the decline for the last 3 years. The thing that have been consistent though are fires and squatters. So if you look at the green line shows the property with squatters, and it's fairly consistent. About 50% of the properties that we end up with abatements on have squatters in them. And the same with fires. It's fairly consistent where about 50% of the properties have fires on them. It's something that's gone up a little bit more in the last 2 or 3 years. We have had more properties with fires in them than when I started this job. So some of the trends are starting to move a little bit. Show you some of the projects we did in 2019. This was a property on Moreland. This was a property that an individual owns. I believe he's got 10 or 12 properties still in the city of Lakewood. This was a single family house sitting on a corner. It was left vacant for a number of years. I believe this was a Stockman property. That's the individual. And this ended up catching on fire. We had squatters in it and it ended up burning down. So this property's been torn down. I believe the owner of this property has submitted for 3 houses to be developed. Don't quote me on the exact number, but I do know it's a number of properties or a number of houses that will be developed on what used to be a single family property. This is probably the junkiest property that I've ever dealt with. 14433 Union Avenue, junky in the fact that this property was about 4 feet deep with garbage. It's kind of hard to tell the picture on the right. There's an individual trying to walk through all that garbage, and it was literally up to his waist when he came out of there. So kind of hard to see the picture on the left, but it was left vacant for a little while. It ended up catching on fire. This is one that made I don't remember if it was the Q13 news or Channel 5 news, but yeah, they had some photos of this property and it has since been removed. The building next door is a fairly new duplex, and the entire south side of that building was left charred, and I believe they've fixed that to date. I don't believe that property's rented, but it is fixed. Another one, a fairly noticeable property, 5118 Seattle Avenue. So this is in the Springbrook neighborhood when you cross over the I-5 bridge, and immediately on the right was this building. It used to be Earth Souls or something like that. The individual that bought this property ended up tearing it down. He's going to redevelop it. He's not sure what he's going to do. He's a real estate investor, and he's looking to do something with it, whether it be multifamily or commercial. 8113 Sherwood Forest, property that had a substantial amount of garbage and debris in the back. This is actually a nuisance and a dangerous property. The nuisance has been addressed. The next picture kind of show you what we had. The back of the property was literally filled with garbage and junk. They've since cleaned that up. There is a dangerous, fairly large, dangerous shed that was built in the back of the property that's starting to collapse with that we have to do as a dangerous building. So there's a follow-up on this property, but the nuisance is corrected. One that I believe I've shown you guys before, 8810 Rose Road. This was one that is in the Tillicum neighborhood. It sits behind another house. It ended up catching on fire. Never had the fire department actually bring an excavator to a site and tear it down when they were trying to put it out, but they tried to put this one out 3 different times. Could not get it to go out, so they literally raised the entire property and hosed it down and finally got it to go out. So we had the bank come in, and the bank removed all of the remains, and now it's a lovely vacant lot. 6821 150th property. This property is it was kind of a long-standing nuisance and a long-standing abatement property. This one had been code enforcement's kind of the bane of their existence for probably 4 or 5 years. The owner had a fire, fixed a little bit of it, did some illegal additions, never really did anything, just kept piling garbage and junk and debris on it, and it kept deteriorating and looking worse and worse. So ultimately we went in and removed this property. I think this was Eileen's very first property she ever walked into. It was interesting seeing the assistant city attorney's eyes when she walked onto this property. A commercial property that we removed last year, 11225 Pack Highway. You probably are all familiar with this one. This was a 2-story commercial building. It used to have I believe it was like a massage or sauna or something downstairs, and it was also a commercial cleaning equipment as well. So this thing sat vacant for a while. Unfortunately, it got squatters into it. Another property that we had a fire on. We removed this property about 6 months ago, roughly. 7123 146th Street Southwest. This property would be in the Woodbrook neighborhood. This is a property that is fairly sizable. I think this was about 4 or 5 acres. I don't remember the exact size, but it was a property that had 5 houses on them. Most of them were abandoned. 2 or 3 of them had fires in them. There was continuously squatters in and out of these properties. The owner purchased this property, and it's actually under development and lease right now for a industrial development. So this is on the north end, or the north side of 146th, near the south end of the road, so, or east end of the road. Too many directions. 5103 Filbert. This is a property kind of in the downtown neighborhood. This was a nuisance property, and it was a dangerous building. The owner had multiple cars on site. The property was left vacant. There was squatters in and out of it. The owner finally went in and cleaned up the property. He actually sold it to somebody. The new owner cleaned up the property. They've since remodeled the house, got rid of all the nuisance conditions. As you see the picture on the right, what used to be the garbage and debris would be on the right of the picture. What you can see on the left of the picture on the right is the next nuisance abatement, the neighbor. 5105, unfortunately, is going to be one of the next properties that we deal with. So while we corrected 5103, the neighbor has some issues that we have to address next. So abatements completed to date in 2020. This was a property that I'm certain that you're all probably familiar, 12616 47th Avenue. This would be on the east end of Springbrook Park. So this is the last of the remaining houses that back up to Springbrook Park. This individual has had all kinds of garbage and debris on this property for an untold number of years, almost as long as I've been around at the city. So code enforcement has been dealing with him for a number of years, a number of attempts. We finally went in and did a nuisance abatement. Got him to remove a bunch of his junk and debris. He ended up building in the back. You can see a fairly sizable garage that he ended up building, and literally put 9/10 of his garbage in that debris, or in that garage, which was a good thing. The other side of his house, you can see again, it was just littered with construction debris and random things that he'd saved from jobs. So he again moved all that, probably about 90% of it, into that garage. He got rid of some of it. It's a much cleaner property than it used to be. One that we're dealing with I have to go do an inspection tomorrow to final this for rental housing, 10506 Bridgeport Way. This is right, literally fronted on Bridgeport Way, about where Active Park would be. So this property was one that we inspected. It's kind of hard to tell, but the pictures on the left, you can see the posts that are supporting the walkway. There's 2x4s, and there's a bunch of framing supporting those. So these things have been let go for so long that the posts were actually rotting and failing. The deck was starting to come down. The railings were all rotten. It was a completely unsafe condition. The photos on the right, you can see where they've redone the decks. This was the south side of the building. The building scale is kind of hard, but it was a property where this side was let completely deteriorate. It was a single wall construction, so all of the siding on the outside was actually shear wall holding the building together, and it was rotten through and through. This thing was in sorry condition. So we went in and posted it, had them redo all the siding and all the framing. They fixed the shear wall, so this building is considerably safer. This was their attempt to make one of the second store decks safe. So you can see the photo on the left, they ran some caution tape. Beneath those pieces of plywood that they put there were actual holes in the deck, and it was rotting and caving in. And that was very close to a tenant's doorway where they would go in and out. So they went in and fixed that. You can see the photo on the right where they fixed that. Another property that we had a fire on, 5509 Boston Avenue. This would be in the Springbrook neighborhood. This one actually had 3 fires. Squatters inside of the property, they burned the downstairs, we boarded it up, they got in, they burned the upstairs, we boarded it up, they got back in and burned the downstairs again, and we boarded it up. So it was quite an undertaking with this one. And about 2 days before we had the demolition crew out there, someone drove their car into the garage door. You can see this photo on the left there, somebody crashed the garage door. So this house was a real problem. Some properties in the Woodbrook neighborhood, 6419, 6422, and 14601 Woodbrook. Those are all contiguous properties, kind of in the south. It's probably the northeast corner of the Woodbrook neighborhood. So these are all now commercial properties. They're all going to be redeveloped as a warehouse development. So this was a barn that was vacant. Squatters were living in it. There was all kinds of debris around the barn. We demolished the barn. A couple of other buildings. These were, again, there's 2 garages on the property. We had a number of abandoned vehicles, stolen vehicles on this property. There was squatters in and out of the buildings. The photo on the right, you can kind of see between the buildings, there's various wood and debris that kind of jets out at an angle. They cut through the building on the left, they cut through the building on the right, and they would go between these units. They had quite elaborate tents and housing set up inside these things. So those buildings were removed. Now it's again, it's under development, or at least it's under review for development for an industrial site. So where we're at with active abatements, another property that you're probably all familiar with. One of the reasons that we quite possibly have a little bit of a backlog on the abatements and haven't gone through as many as the QFC parcel with the strip mall. So this has been a long contentious property. The building official was in, I believe he was deposed last week. So the attorneys for the other side were asking him some interesting questions, and our attorney apparently said he did a fantastic job answering questions, and kind of frustrated their attorneys to no end. So this again is a vacant property. It's been vacant for actually almost 11 years now. When we posted it unsafe, myself and the building inspector, there was literally water flowing through the building. It was running in, it had numerous waterfalls. You speak of water features in Boise. We had a water feature in downtown Lakewood. It was the QFC building. Another one is 2621 84th Street. This is Karwan Mobile Home Park. Another property that we're still working through. This one's about the same as QFC, about a year and a half in the process. So this one, the owners have addressed about half of what we've asked them to do. There's a number of trailers that were unsafe. This one, somebody broke in and started stripping the trailer down, redid a bunch of electrical work. That one has been removed. There's a number of carports on this property that need to be assessed structurally. So it's kind of hard to tell, but you can kind of see in this photo. So this is a fairly normal carport that is on that property, and it's got a bit of a list. This thing is actually listing to the right in this photo, and it's got a bit of a curve to the roof because nobody's maintained this roof for probably since it was built in the 70s. And they are starting to rot. The structure's starting to fail. The framing's rotten. They're starting to lean over, and they're becoming unsafe. So there's about 15 of these that have not been addressed on site that remain. This is the thing in the center of the complex. This used to be a laundry and bathroom, so it was converted into a living space. There were no permits. The roof is another thing, dumping water into the structure. The plumbing is backed up in this thing. I'm not certain why they did what they did. This also serves as one of the main power centers for the complex. And instead of fixing the roof before they fix the electrical, they fix the electrical first, and the roof continues to dump water into the electrical power room. So it's still got a lot of issues that they need to fix. And I'm not too confident in their abilities to get things done because they tend to do things in a backwards fashion. So this property does have some issues. It's got some sewer issues that we're working out with the county and the owners, and hopefully we'll have this property addressed this year. Another commercial property, this would be the old Denny's building, 6112 100th Street. This property is in line with permits. I believe it's at the state of sewer review. It needs to get some pretreatment review for the new owners to connect up to the sewers. So the building department is working with that. This does look to be fixed within the next 6 months. I would assume that permits will probably be issued within the next probably 2 weeks to 3 weeks. This is one that had a fire on the backside of the property. There was squatters on the backside of the property when it was vacant, and they decided to see how far they could burn this property. The fire was pretty much contained to the kitchen area, the storage. There were some cooler units and so forth on the back. That's where most of the damage was contained to. Another property, commercial property, 8410 South Tacoma Way, a property that has 5 single-family houses on it. It was a rental inspection property that we did. It failed incredibly. Most of these houses had all kinds of life safety issues, to the point where it really wasn't feasible for the owner to deal with it. So he's boarded them up. He is going to demolish these, and I think he's contemplating selling the property. So this one is still in the process for the owner to finish. 4824 First Street Southwest, kind of in the downtown neighborhood, a vacant house. Again, there were squatters in and out of it. The backside had a dangerous addition on it. There was all kinds of garbage. The bank has stepped in. They've pretty much addressed all of the issues with this property. It's boarded up. It's been secured. I don't see any issues, but it's not fully addressed yet. Kind of a unique property, one that I'm trying to figure out, myself and the attorneys, we're going to figure out how to make this work, but it's 8602 and 8604 Maple Street Southwest. So this has there's 2 parcels. The houses are on each parcel. The garage is dead center in the back of the parcels. So it's literally shared by 2 properties. The garage itself is failing, is starting to collapse. The siding and the framing, the roof is sagging. It's got all kinds of issues. So this is one that we're trying to figure out, do we address the garage and repair it, which will cost almost the same as demolishing it, but we don't have the issue of tearing a garage down and trying to figure out who to assess, who's responsible for the construction of it. It's one that we're going to debate a little bit more and figure out how to address it. This is the 8113 Sherwood Forest. This is the storage shed on the back of the property. This is a fairly gigantic storage shed in the ways of storage sheds. It was about 14 feet wide and probably like 28 to 30 feet long. So it's a giant shed. It's got all kinds of issues with framing and foundation and roof, and it's not a safe structure. It's also built up against the neighbor's property, so it's not in the correct location. It can't actually be built there. 7119 Foster Street. This is a property that the owner's son, unfortunately, is living in the garage, has done all kinds of illegal conversion, including sewers. There was a time where we went and inspected this property and there was sewage running down the alley. So this is the inside. This is the individual's kitchen. Not a very safe, not a very sanitary place for somebody to live. Inside, it was full of garbage and debris. There's a number of different walls, a number of different framing additions that have been added into this structure. 230 North Lake Drive, a property that I just posted the complaint on Friday. So this is again a vacant house. The police have had issues with the individual coming and going. It's literally the same individual who comes and goes. The owner passed away. He claims to be the owner of the house now, yet he has no proof. So this is one that the bank is working on foreclosure, but it's going to take a little while to do. So we've posted it and we'll get the bank to board this thing up and address it. So that is my presentation. If you have any questions, I would be great to share any information if I can.
Questions for Mr. Gum? Ms. Moss, the waving fingers. You're muted.
that better?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just curious as to what's going on with the building next to the donut shop.
Oh, building next to the donut shop is on my list again. I'm trying to think of where I am with that. I inspected that I've been inspecting it every single time I drive by it, which is daily. But the last time I was out there and took photos was probably 2 weeks ago. It's got graffiti. It's got some issues. I'm trying to get the fire department, Michael Dobbs, the assistant fire marshal, to go out there with me. There's some issues that they never corrected when we did the initial abatement order. So the first floor in a vacant building, well, any vacant building can't be filled with debris and flammable items. So that building, the first floor, is completely full of all kinds of flammable items and commercial debris and furniture. And so within the next probably 2 weeks, that's one that's going to get addressed as well and go down the dangerous building process yet again.
He has put a lot of money into that building since we started with this.
Oh yeah, I believe his roof and the repairs on the last go round were well in excess of $100,000.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Whalen.
Mr. Gum, just a simple question, but every time we scrape a property, I'm always thankful, number one, but number two, I always wonder what happens with the utilities. Do they get capped? Do they get located somewhere? Because that's got to be kind of a tricky coordination with the various utility providers.
Yeah, usually the power companies are notified, so our contractor will work with whether it's Lakewood Power or whomever. They'll come out and do a quick locate, and we usually pound in a white stake wherever the electric is disconnected, wherever the gas is disconnected. Lots of times those things disappear over time, but we always try and mark them when we leave. So the water, everything is disconnected when we leave. The nice thing is most of them are completely redeveloped. So the water company usually, and the power company, they'll just come out and do another locate, and they're digging up those lines and redoing them anyway.
Okay. The gas lines are capped and left in place, obviously. Okay, great.
Yep.
Any other
Thank you.
questions? Well, thank you. Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you. Jeff, thank you for the presentation. I just got, as part of the compliance, I'm assuming they know you're going to follow up, and is it that they know it's less expensive for them to do and less of a hassle, or is it they know they can redevelop the properties right now? Because I think that one property that I just drove by there the other night and realized, I didn't realize it was that white house down in Lake City. But right across the street, there's a new housing development going in.
Yep.
And it said new houses from the 500s. Yep. So it is part of it. These landlords are saying, yeah, I'll scrape it. It's not worth anything, but I can turn it around fast, either rebuild on it or sell it off.
Most of the owner occupied are ones that have been recently purchased. So the owner has sold it to somebody who has, and almost always it's a developer. It's usually someone who's looking to develop it fairly quickly. So I would say, I don't know, probably about 70 to 80% of the ones that have that at least this year that we've had owners do have been developers that are buying them and turning them around.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Anyone else? Seeing none. Well, thank you, Mr. Gum. Great review as always, and continue your good work. You're understandably, those commercial properties tend to take a lot more time, and it cuts down the numbers, but the results are excellent. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Is Chief Zorro available?
Yes, he is.
All right, then we will go to a review of the first quarter police report. Chief?
Mayor Anderson and council members, good evening. Can everybody hear me? Very good, thank you. So let me get the share screen going. Okay. A few things to go over in this report that are a little different than some other reports. Some of it you've obviously seen before, some of the same stuff. This is one of the things that I wanted to touch on were calls for service. And I touched on this a little bit last time in looking at the calls for service during the COVID pandemic and how that impacted our workload. And I know it's a little congested, but if you look from the start from the bottom going up, the bottom two lines are self-initiated activity that officers see. So like traffic stops. And you see the dark green being 19, light green being 2020. The middle two, the brown and yellow, are dispatched calls. Those are ones where somebody calls 911 and says and wants to report something or has an officer come out. And then the top two is a combination of those bottom two. So as you can see, there was a decrease in both dispatched and self-initiated calls for service. And we look really, at the beginning of March as the COVID time. So that's where we can start seeing some of the impact. But what's also notable is in May 25th, I believe, is when George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. And we started seeing some of the civil unrest and just some of the demonstrations and other things. And in looking at, did that have an impact on our calls for service? Certainly, they didn't go up. So it's not like we had a large amount of crime being reported during that period. So even, we did have several demonstrations that were all peaceful and managed well, but that we didn't see any sort of increase in any kind of criminal activity or large scale vandalism or looting. And then these numbers you've all seen, you've seen this chart before, but what I'd like to get to, unless there's questions on this, what I'd like to get to are the graphs, because there's a couple things that I think they demonstrate pretty well. First, these, you can see that, these charts I've shown before is they show the level of crime as sort of a ratio to population in the districts. And you can see that, 2, 3, and 4, which are largely our central or commercial district, is where we see the disproportionate amount of certainly property crime, and that drives, as we've seen before, that drives our overall crime rate. Now, person crimes, one of the things, and there's an analysis that narrative in a couple slides that this is addressed in or talks about as well. But you'll notice every second quarter there's a spike. And while we did see an increase from the first quarter, the percent increase for this second quarter was 8% as compared to anywhere from 12 to, I think, 2017 was 41%. So we've seen very significant increases or spikes going into every second quarter. This only being 8%, I think is significant. And almost exclusively accounted for by aggravated assaults, which are felony assaults, typically can be an assault with some kind of a weapon. And then property crimes, we also saw an increase as well. We are still somewhat on the lower end if you look historically, at least for the past 3 years. This number is almost exclusively dictated by auto theft. And I talked to our sergeant that supervises the Puget Sound Auto Theft Task Force, and there were several auto theft rings and career car thieves that were out and about and very active over the past few months. They have made some arrests, so we'll see what happens in the next quarter as far as the impact on that. But as far as the overall, all the property crimes, the increase is exclusively auto theft. So burglaries and other larceny and other property crimes are down. And then society crimes by quarter, and you can see, society crimes, those are vice investigations and narcotics, and those are almost exclusively driven by self-initiated contact or on-view contact by officers. So if you'll remember the chart that showed the self-initiated activity was declined for the second quarter, it stands to reason that then we would see that same decline in society crime. And then, of course, total crime by quarter. As I've said before, or we've seen before, our crime rates in most jurisdictions, crime rates are driven by property crimes, and the increase we saw there, it drove this increase, and in addition to, in small part, the increase in persons crimes via aggravated assaults. But if you subtracted just the increase in aggravated assaults and vehicle thefts, we would be still be on a significant downward trend. Then accidents as well in the second quarter. I think this is kind of intuitive, really. That with everybody in lockdown and not going to work, and fewer people on the road, you see fewer accidents. And here's some of just a recap of some of the incidents that we had and a little bit of analysis. So we did have a very tragic incident in the parking lot of St. Clair Hospital where the suspect drove there to see his estranged wife, and they were going through a divorce. She was an employee there. He convinced her to come out and talk to him, and convinced her then to have the friend that she's dating come out, who was also an employee there. And he, when they met in the parking lot, he pulled out a gun, shot and killed the boyfriend, and then shot and killed himself. And this was all on video camera, surveillance camera. And it was just tragic. And it was, that's what he went there to do. There was no decision making when you watch it on video. That's just immediately what he did when he saw the boyfriend. And even more, I guess, tragically, the woman that was involved lost her father to suicide when she was little. So just a very tragic event that our officers dealt with earlier in the quarter. There was a pretty, I guess, convoluted or complicated, complex call involving a suspect that was armed with a knife and attempted to rob a store, and then led officers on essentially a foot chase and almost onto the freeway with tasers not being effective. And it took several officers just to get him surrounded and get him into custody with no injuries. But it's significant in that there were some, I think, severe mental health issues going on there. And it took an entire patrol squad to corral him and get him into custody with no injuries. And I think very good work on the part of our patrol squad. And then I talked a little bit earlier about the demonstrations and the marches that we had in Lakewood. I think we've had a total of 6. The most recent being Thursday, and that was just a demonstration at the station, just on the sidewalk and holding up signs and there for a while. Nothing even remotely close to what we've seen on the news in other jurisdictions, and just people expressing their frustration, their dissatisfaction with the criminal justice system. And then we did have our officer-involved shooting that is still being investigated by the crime response unit led by Puyallup and Bonnie Lake. And with that, we are still waiting on returns from the State Patrol Crime Lab on some evidence, where the investigators are waiting for that before it can be presented to the prosecutor. And once that happens, then we'll, of course, get the charging decision from Mary Robinette. And I talked about the increase in second quarter aggravated assaults or crimes against persons, and that's discussed a little more here as well. Now, if we look, one of the things that I wanted to look at historically, we thought there might be an interest in looking at where, year to date for second quarters, going back 5 years, where where we stand, and you can see we're still, this is total crime, historically low. So even with that bit of a spike in vehicle thefts and aggravated assaults, still on a very good and healthy downward trend. Now it's kind of interesting what seems an important topic 1 month, a couple months later, kind of takes a back burner. But I did want to present some information on fireworks and our calls for service this last 4th of July. You can see these are calls just related to fireworks and just police calls for service for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Nothing really outstanding in any of these. They're all fairly consistent with what we've seen in years past. Then we also looked at West Pierce numbers, and these were their calls for service. These aren't fires. I'll talk about that here in a second. But these were their calls for service for the 1st through the 6th. And obviously you can see the just climbs starting from the 1st through the 4th and then drops back down again. And this was what they had sent us regarding some of the incidents that they had. 14 incidents of firework related fires. And they were pretty easy to tell for them that they were caused or related to fireworks. And these were for all of West Pierce jurisdictions. So 12 of those were from Lakewood. And I was out on the 4th of July, and I out with the patrol squad, just seeing what it was like this year. And there were, the fire department was running and kept busy that night with several brush fires. A couple of them were put out as either electrical pole fires or garage fires. But when you got there, they were almost exclusively brush fires, maybe next to a power pole or next to a garage, but they were all, it was all just brush. And then use of force is obviously a topic of interest recently. So I thought I'd give a year-to-date count of where we're at with our use of force. I give some of this in my year-end report. It's not necessarily this detailed. It's just more kind of big picture numbers. But in the first 6 months, we've had 65 incidents. That is roughly on par with the last 2 years as far as the total numbers. Most of which you can see were just physical strength, and that's either using an arm bar or just needing 2 officers to get somebody into custody, and there was 43 of those. And you can see on down the line how they're tracked with 8 taser and 7 vascular neck restraints, which, by the way, I know is also a big topic of conversation. I think we talked about it at the last, a little bit at the last council meeting I spoke at. So you all know that News Tribune has a couple reporters coming to the station tomorrow morning. We're going to do a brief demonstration for them on VNR and show them the difference between a chokehold and a vascular neck restraint, and the history behind its use, and just some statistics we have as far as safety and its use. And then you can go on down the line and see the types of force that have been used and over the first 6 months. OC spray, that's pepper spray. I've heard discussions recently about people referring to CS gas or OC or pepper spray. And I can tell you, we don't use CS in the field. It's strictly OC or pepper spray. And it doesn't get used very often because it largely is ineffective, except on the officers that use it. Seem to take the brunt of it when it does get used. So we have it as an option, but it does not get used very often. One of the things that I've talked about also in my annual report for the past few years is putting our uses of force in context with comparing it to our total number of arrests and total calls for service. And I think this is important now, especially because this is something that is sort of defining us as a profession. for something that we use seldomly, I think, is really, like it or not, coming to define us. But of the total arrests, the 65 incidents account for 7%. And you'll see there, I say most uses of force are related to an arrest, but not all. There are some that are related to involuntary commits, where there's somebody that's having a mental health episode and some amount of force is needed to get that person restrained and to a hospital. But by and large, you can say that it's related to an arrest for the most part. And that accounts for 7%. And then if you look at the total calls for service that our officers have had in the first half of the year, it's 0.26%. And I bolded the point there just to make it clear. It is 0.25% of all the calls for service require a use of force. And again, I say that I think it's relevant in that is still, even though that's something we don't do very often, it's still something that we're being defined by. And that is the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Let's see. Spool people back up. Mr. Brenstetter.
Hey, Mr. Mayor. Chief, on the 65 use of force occasions so far this year, and I know you briefed us that every one of those would get an internal review of some sort to look at that. How many of those was there a concern with policy or procedure on after that review?
I would have to go back and look. There was nothing that required any formal discipline, but I'd have to go back and look at each one to see if we had any discussions or made any policy changes.
I guess that if perhaps you could do that for us, because with the scrutiny around use of force, there's always the intimation that departments and cities don't do anything, even if there is some adjustment indicated.
Right, I will look into that. And one other thing that I wanted to point out too, and I meant to, and I just saw it as one of my notes, I wasn't able to include it in the slides, but we were also able to look at where the uses of force or what kinds of calls they occurred on. And just generally, 80% were a dispatched call for service. It wasn't which means 20% were from either traffic stops or something self-initiated. So I know there's some conversation out there, a lot of focus anyways, on traffic stops and use of force that comes from traffic stops, but 80% of our incidents occurred from dispatched calls.
Mr. Volkey.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, what's with the aggravated assault number? Is there any common thread?
Guns.
Guns.
Yeah, it's gun crime, and that's what for the past maybe 2 years, I guess, just a gradual increase in what we, the frequency that we see gun crimes. That's really the bottom line. There's no other weapon being used. You can look at, it's not necessarily related to domestic violence. Like, we're not seeing more serious domestic violence incidents. It's just largely related to gun crimes.
So the difference, a robbery would be if I pulled a gun out and mugged you.
Correct.
But when is it assault? If I shoot at you, but I don't necessarily have to shoot at you to make it an aggravated assault?
You do not. If you,
Okay.
intimidation with a weapon could be considered
Oh,
that. Shooting and missing would be that. Drive-by shooting. Anything involving gun, the homicides that we had.
okay. Thank you.
Ms. Farmer.
Couple of random questions. So I apologize if I missed it, but there's a typical spike in the second quarter in-person crime. Any idea what the common thread is there?
I would say the weather. That's when things, the people come out of hibernation and start getting into summer and warmer weather, and that's just really the one consistent factor in the second quarter.
Interesting. Okay. On page 12, on the second bullet, you were talking about an individual who was hard to subdue. He had heavy clothing, taser, and there was the phrase, there was the threat of a non-lethal shotgun.
Yeah.
I apologize, I'm unfamiliar with what a non-lethal shotgun is.
Right. So they are shotguns that shoot little rubber balls, essentially, and they're colored bright orange, so there's no confusing them with a regular shotgun. But just having that out was enough for when the person saw it, he ended up complying, and they were able to get him into custody.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Clearly, I've never seen one, and I never got a chance to do my ride along because of COVID. So interesting. On the, I thought that was a very interesting percentage on the use of force compared to total calls for the first 6 months of this year. And I'm curious if you happen to have in your hip pocket what the percentage was for all of 2019.
I don't. That is in my year-end report. It's on our website, and I've done that every year for the past, I don't know how many years, probably going back 10 years. But looked at that percentage anyways. But it's always about that low. It's generally that low. So
Okay.
It's been pretty consistent.
Okay, thank you. And just a commentary on the fireworks numbers. They look disarmingly low, and then I realize how many people complain, and it's terrifying, and they're up all night, and they're with buckets of water, and stressful, and pets, and all that sort of thing. So I just wanted to make a comment that it's an ongoing thing, and even if they don't pick up the phone and call because there's some immediate threat to their property, I don't know, it's just an awkward thing. Actual calls for service make sense, and it obviously it's good to track those things, and it's difficult to track all of those things that don't quite get there. Thank you.
It is for sure, and with the fireworks too. I think people understand what Lakewood's. A lot of people understand what our ordinance is, and for some of it is allowed, and I think there is just a general tolerance that a lot of people have going into it, knowing their pets are going to be freaked out, and they're going to be concerned about a fire on their property, and they don't call us. And that's one of the things that we talked about at some point when we were discussing the ordinances. It's the expectations that the public are going to have if we change an ordinance, as well as we'll likely see calls for service go up as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
No problem.
So Chief, I have one. You indicated there's been a spike in the area, generally south, I assume the South Sound or Puget Sound area, regarding car thefts.
Yes.
In your opinion, has that had anything to do with the jail's catch and release policies, or don't allow you to incarcerate people?
I could speak anecdotally and say it sure makes sense that it would be that, because the people that commit those kinds of crimes that's what they do when they're out. And we've caught people in stolen cars with guns, and the jails wouldn't take them because of the COVID threat. So undoubtedly, in my mind, anyways, there's a connection there.
Any other questions for the chief? Well, I see a hand up, but not from council. Well, thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate it. We appreciate what you do and appreciate the transparency of your reports. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Now we would move to a review of amendments to Community Development Block Grants CARES Act funding program. Mr. Buer.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Previously, the City Council approved a motion to set up a CDBG CARES Act deferred loan program. I believe the date was back in May of 2020. It's not moving as fast as we would like, however. As of today, we've had 10 applications with a maximum award of $10,000 each. That takes us to $100,000. Even so, we would still have $251,000 available through the deferred loan program. We would like to speed it up and therefore recommending amending the deferred loan program and exchange it or change it back into a grant program. This was discussed previously by the City Council. There were some thoughts about reviewing it in December or so to see if that is something that you would want to do. But given the situation and the number of applications that have been awarded under the Coronavirus Relief Fund, we're thinking that this might help make people apply a little faster. We're proposing to bring this back as at your next meeting as an amendment to your previously approved motion, Mr. Mayor. And that really concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Yes, Mr. Brandstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Buer, the amendment to this program would put it in very similar, or would it be changed to identical to the grant program that we created with other funds?
It would not be similar to the grant program that we've created for the CRF. Under CDBG, you're still required to make awards provided that you're helping or assisting lower and moderate income people. So that becomes the challenge with this application. And that's one of the reasons I think it's been slow to award the $351,000. Our thought would be if we change it from a loan to a grant, it may help.
Okay. And given that we have the two programs well, you have 10 applications for the program we're discussing tonight. Are any of those applicants also applicants for the other program?
I do not believe so. We do have we have performed the lottery. We do have applicants that were not provided an award, and provided the others all apply. One thought would be to give those who are on the list the opportunity to use the CDBG grant application.
So if the other program is essentially, we're going to have a lottery because we have more applications than we have money.
Yes.
So is there any way to look at screening either in conjunction with or before that lottery? Well, we're not going to act before you hold the lotteries, but you would then take folks who were unsuccessful in the lottery and inform them of this program to see if they were eligible?
Yes.
All right, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions for Mr. Buer? Don't see any electronic hands up. Wave if you have any questions. Well, thank you again, Mr. Buer, and appreciate your flexibility in getting that changed. We now move to reports by the city manager, Mr. Caulfield.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson, and good evening, Deputy Mayor and council members. A handful of updates, if I may. First off, I just want to congratulate and point out some great work by our legal team, our police department, and actually even our community and economic development department regarding the deja vu litigation, because at this point now it is over. Their attorney filed a dismissal order on Friday, and we don't expect it to come back. I will say that the investigation that was conducted by our detectives, our investigators, as well as some frontline patrol officers was absolutely outstanding. And we would never have gotten to where we are in regards to that without that great work. So I'd just like to, echo that based on, the presentation that you just heard from the chief. That's just one of the many examples that LPD does on a weekend and day in and day out basis, actually. On the Onyx project, so unfortunately the city manager was out riding around, and I noticed that we're not putting sidewalks in front of Oak Brook Park as part of the Onyx project. And in fact, this is where the city, and we should be complying with our own conditions of development. And so Mr. Busich and his team, they have initiated a change order of $35,000 to go ahead and put in curbs, gutters, and sidewalks along the frontage of Oak Brook Park as it connects into, then it will connect into, I think it's 97th Court Southwest. Don't hold me to that, but that's kind of the general area. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. Before COVID-19 hit, we were getting ready to roll out really strong our imaging campaign, our Build Your Better Here. Unfortunately, that took a back seat. However, we did use an opportunity this weekend to roll out a video in support of Pierce County Trails Day as a kind of catalyst to kick it off. We are going to look at some opportunities to perhaps do something in August and September in advance of schools. And again, the purpose there, just like parks, is to communicate the great parks that we have in our community, and then also on the school side to communicate, the great schools, public and private, that we have here in Lakewood. I will say our senior government policy analyst, Shannon Kelly Fong, provided some stats in terms of the outreach on that. And in terms of just Facebook alone, it was pretty phenomenal over a very short period of time. So the video is sticking out there, if you will, and people are viewing it. So we will continue to do what we can there in this environment. I want to recognize our maintenance and operations team. Unfortunately, this weekend, some individuals went down to Harry Todd Park and tore the bathrooms apart. And to say tore them apart would actually be an understatement. Right now, those current bathrooms are actually slated to be demolished as part of the $3.5 million Harry Todd Park, park improvement plan that's going to break ground in the middle part of September after the summer is over. So at first we were contemplating just shutting down the bathrooms. However, our crew went in there and on their own and brought the bathrooms back up to a standard so that they could be used. Unfortunately, the sink is beyond repair. The sinks that are in there, however, the commodes and the urinals are back in order, so to speak. But again, I just want to call out our M&O crew for doing that and having that resource available. Otherwise, we could have rolled in a couple of porta potties, but that's really not too effective given the amount of use and popularity of that facility, particularly during this time of the year. Our team continues to have discussions with both Pierce County DEM and the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, specific to establishing some COVID-19 testing sites here in Lakewood. I know we've been in communication with the West Pierce Fire and Rescue Agency, and they are actually going to do some testing over at their firehouse on Steilacoom Boulevard, and I believe it's Wednesday, the 29th. I believe it's Wednesday, the 29th. We continue to have dialogue, and we have identified as our number 1 and 2 priorities, both the Springbrook neighborhood and the Tillicum Woodbrook neighborhood, followed by, given its central location, doing some mobile or having an opportunity for people to come and test in the town center area. And we're going to reach out to our friends across the street and see if that would be an opportunity, since it is private property, and would like to get, some good good visibility on the site. So more to come on that. I'm going to forward you a couple of letters that the school superintendent, Mr. Banner, forwarded me just a little bit ago. So long story short, they have made the decision based on the current environment, and I know I don't need to go through the details on this, but they are going to kick off their school year on September 2nd, and it will be in a virtual learning model. So their brick and mortar facilities will not be open. And at that point in time, depending upon where COVID goes, they can at that point in time bring in back their employees and their students. But at this point in time, they are going to be going full time to a virtual learning environment. The Lakewood Community Foundation has kicked off their 4th annual Larry Saunders Service Award, and applications will be accepted through September 25th, 2020. And then they have their process that they go through. And the past 3 years, this body has actually recognized that community member as selected by the Community Foundation at one of your council meetings in January. So we'll try and stay on task on that. In the last couple of weeks, maybe even just a week and a half, maybe even just a week, we've gotten a number of requests from a number of restaurants, not a number, but a good enough number of restaurants, as well as our casinos here in town, about allowing for outside dining and drinking and such like that. So long story short, our planning manager, Courtney Burnell, and our assistant city manager for community and economic development, Dave Buer, have worked to develop some administrative rules where we would provide a 90-day permit to allow that kind of activity. They would have to comply with whatever regulations that the Liquor Control Board, as well as the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, and of course the governor's direction regarding staying safe and things along those lines. We do view it as an opportunity to try and help our business community away. And so if they can do it in a safe way, we're gonna let them do it on our end. So again, we're working through the details there, and that could be up and running as soon as in the next day or two, actually. Probably got an email from Ms. Kelly Fong. She has uploaded to your iPads the contents from your March 7th, 2020 retreat. And so we have provided that for you, so you have an opportunity to kind of ruminate on it. And so hopefully maybe sometime later this year, we'll have an opportunity once we get into phase 3 or hopefully phase 4 to be able to get together and get back on top of that. What I can tell you is that we have looked at your priorities in terms of what the outcome of that is. And it's housing, it's infrastructure, it's code enforcement, a lot of things that you heard today. And so what I can tell you is that the budget proposal that I'll be drafting to present to you on October 5th will certainly incorporate at a very, very high level within the budget itself, those overarching themes. Also on Friday, the police chief received 6 applications to serve on the Pierce County Force Investigation Team representing Lakewood. And so the city clerk is also going to load those on your iPad, so you have an opportunity to review those over the next few days in advance of your meeting next Monday under new business, and then you'll have the opportunity to make those appointments. Please note that one of the individuals has already been appointed, Larry Woods. You might recognize Mr. Woods. He has been actively involved in Lakewood for a number of years, including being your Lake City Neighborhood Association president. And so again, just wanted to provide that to you so you have an opportunity in advance of your council meeting, your regular council meeting on Monday. So getting on to the city's finances, particularly what's Congress going to do. So the good news is I have stopped checking the news on like a 2 or 3 hour basis because that was making me a little unsurly last week, but it was just me, myself, and I. So, however, what we do know is that the Senate did come out with a $1 trillion package earlier today. I have not had an opportunity to go through it in detail. One thing we do know is that it provides funding to local schools, colleges, and universities to help them gear up and start in this environment later on in the fall. However, what it doesn't include is it doesn't include fiscal relief for local governments. Now, the good news is that the House's version, which passed out of the House, called the HEROES Act, is a $3 trillion package and includes funding for local governments. We also know that not only is the House as a whole, as a body, supportive of that, we also know that a portion of the Senate is very supportive of that, but not the majority. And also we understand that the administration, including our president, is also supportive of that. So we're hopeful in the next 2 to 3 or 4 weeks, however long it takes, I'm just trying to manage expectations, that they somewhere maybe come in the middle, or at the end of the day, again, provide financing to help local governments and county governments. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that, and we continue to be actively engaged in that process as well. At the state level, you might remember going back now a year and a half, the state legislature set up what's called the Commercial Aviation Coordinating Commission. And that's made up of members of the House and the Senate at the state level, as well as a number of stakeholders as it relates to aviation. Long story short, their task, as tasked by the governor and then blessed by the state legislature, is to identify another airport within particularly the Puget Sound region or the west side, given that SeaTac is not sufficient for any growth. And you might recall earlier this year, I shared with you an analysis that the Puget Sound Regional Council did in terms of the activity within the air on just within 1 hour. And for example, South King County and North Pierce County, it gets very, 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 very busy. So the ability to put in another runway at SeaTac is not going to work. One of the areas, as this was going on, going back again a year and a half, we were contacted by our federal delegation, and I know this body has been adamantly against, as well as now our congressional delegation, our 2 senators and our congressman, Mr. Heck, are adamantly against commercial air services at JBLM. The good news is that this commission did not identify JBLM as one of their 6 options that they have narrowed down to, and then those 6 options are going to get narrowed down to 2, and then to 1, and then that 1 recommendation will be presented to the state legislature on January 1st, 2022. So a year from this January. So there's another almost a year and a half work that they're going to be doing. However, they did ask to put JBLM back on the table for discussion purposes, including for the staff that is staffing this commission to reach out to those of us in Pierce County. And so we have reached out to them, and we are going to make ourselves available to be involved in that conversation. And we will also be reaching out to Pierce County and Tacoma, who actually would be most negatively impacted if commercial air came to JBLM. Again, to just communicate the number of challenges that exist by putting commercial air there. One of them being, again, looking at Puget Sound Regional Council's analysis of air traffic. I don't know how it works. As a matter of fact, a number of folks in the room I would define as, the experts in air travel pointed that out. The other issue is under our code, if commercial air was to come to JBLM, they would have, the FAA standards for commercial air are much higher than military. So they would need to immediately address the North Clear Zone issue, as well as address all the non-conforming use issues in both of our air corridors, which would cost hundreds of millions of dollars for them to be able to do that. So we're going to point that out to them, as we have in conversations with our federal delegation. The other thing that we're going to do is I am going to make a recommendation as part of your state legislature policy manual, that there is a statement in there communicating this body's opposition to having commercial air at JBLM. There was a comment that was made that there are other places within the United States the continental United States where the Air Force and commercial air share. So technically that's true. There is one place, one out of, I think it's, let me get the number here. Oh, here we go. There are 70 active duty Air Force installations in the United States and another 87 that are for Air National Guard and Air Force Reserve. So a total of 157, and only one they share does commercial air happen there. And it's actually at Joint Base Charleston, which is the Charleston International Airport. Also, they don't just have one runway, they have multiple runways, and the military is physically separated from commercial air. So it is nowhere near apples to apples. And then again, all the other installations throughout the United States do not have commercial air as part of military operations. So again, just wanted to keep you appraised of that. Some new information earlier this month. Some folks came in requesting a pre-application to construct an enhanced services facility along Pacific Highway. It's actually the area just north of Lakewood Ford and just south of where the new hotel is going in, right by the railroad trestle there. And so that pre-application is going to occur on August 6th. Right now, that's kind of what we know. What I can tell you is that this body made some really significant changes to our code about a year and a half ago to address this. So the requirements are pretty significant if they do want to open up in Lakewood. This is a commercial area. It's not single family residential, so it is allowed. However, it will have to go through the hearing examiner process because a conditional use permit will be required. And of course, that'll all be communicated to the applicants on August 6th. And if you recall, ESFs are 16-bed institutions. They're there to help those in significant need, but a lot of times, those are individuals that need additional help given their mental condition, as well as some of their maybe not so positive activities that they've had in the past. So it is something that potentially is coming to Lakewood. But again, I just wanted to give you a heads up that we did receive a request for a pre-application. Two more items, the Defense Community Infrastructure Program. And this is a reflection of our very good working relationships with our legislators, particularly at the federal and the state level. The following members of Congress have called the OEA director to advocate for our support for our JBLM North project. Not send a note, directly called, personally called. Of course, our Congressman Denny Heck, Congressman Derek Kilmer, who is also a member of the Defense Sub-Appropriations Committee, and get this, Congressman Adam Smith, who is the chair of the House Armed Services Committee. In addition, Senator Cantwell directed that a very senior member of her staff, and we believe it might be the chief of staff, also called the OEA executive director to communicate her support for this project. So while there's no guarantee we're going to get the grant, certainly we have left our mark in not only helping create this federal legislation, but also communicating the importance and what it means to the Lakewood community. So well done there, Mayor and Council. Lastly, earlier today, we received an email from the Lakewood Sister Cities Association, from Connie Lackady and Connie Coleman Lackady. And she communicated that her board has been in contact with representatives from Gimhae, Republic of South Korea, one of our sister cities, and they have a corporation in their city, and they want to make available to us 1,000 sets of personal protective equipment, as well as 10,000 masks. The request was directed to Mayor Anderson, and so the mayor and I spoke earlier today. And so we're going to go ahead and respond in the affirmative on that. And but just a very, very generous donation from Gimhae. And the name of their corporation is, I believe it's called KM Corporation, and this is one of the things that they have been doing in support of COVID-19. So I just wanted to again give you a heads up on that. Now, where we'll use it and things like that, I think still to be determined, but certainly over time, I know that all of that equipment and those face masks will come in, will be very useful for our community. So with that, Mayor Anderson, that's my report.
Questions for the city manager?
I have a question.
Mr. Whalen.
Yes, Mr. Caulfield, with regard to the bathroom damage on Harry Todd Park, I was responding to a series of emails today from some resident out there that was expressing chagrin that we haven't done anything for Tillicum or the park. I don't know if he was referencing the bathroom damage, but it is what it is. It sounds like it's functional. My question is, with the improvements that we're going to do starting in the fall, is it likely that we will have some cameras out there like we do at Tillicum Park so that we can catch these miscreants who damage our facilities to the detriment
Actually, yes, Deputy Mayor. Actually, it is likely that the contractor, typically the contractors do that since the property is turned over to them. And then one of the other motivations we like contractors to do that if they can is kind of shows progress in time. But that's something that we'll probably be having a discussion with the contractor.
Yeah, after it's all done and turned over, the project that is, are we going to have any active observation out there to make sure that some stuff?
I don't know offhand. I can follow up. I know we're going to have Wi-Fi and things like that, but let me follow up with cameras. We do have portable cameras that we use periodically throughout the city. When nonsense like this pops, unfortunately, it's ugly head.
Very good. Thank you.
Ms. Farmer.
The governor made available some broadband funding fairly recently, and I haven't looked into it, so this may be a crazy question, but it looks like cities and towns are eligible. And so I was just curious if we would be eligible to do anything, apply with that for that money.
So we too were just aware of it. We're not aware of what the specifics are or anything like that. I do know in Lakewood, we have a number of providers that provide broadband, particularly CenturyLink, Comcast, and Click. In addition, there's a number of smaller providers that provide service to a number of businesses, and we have a number of franchises with that. So at this point in time, I'm not aware that we have an issue with access to broadband. I do know, being involved with the Association of Washington Cities for a good number of years, a lot of the broadband requests have been coming from the smaller and rural cities in Washington State because they don't have that level of access, like, for example, exists here in Lakewood.
Would you consider checking in with the superintendent, the school superintendent, because they did quite an extensive survey of parents from the entire K through 12 segment to find out if they had access to computers and to broadband. So it would be very, I think you'd have a clearer picture within the city. Might help.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Don't see any hands up. We'll move to council comments. Ms. Farmer.
Nothing for me. Thank you.
Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd only make one comment about the enhanced service facility. It's my understanding, and I'm not involved in land use stuff at the county level, but that the county has a moratorium. So it's interesting that the place that doesn't have the moratorium is getting the facility. And I know we've had discussions before about moratoriums, and we're always told they don't work, but in fact, they always seem to work for the places that actually use the moratoriums. And so, so this is just another case of now we're going to have this. We're going to have this in an area where we're having hotels. Maybe it'll be well run. Maybe it won't. But again, it goes. These operators operate like water. They always go to the lowest point. So I I just, we're talking about Western State last week. Now we're talking about an ESF. We still get a adult family home, new one about every month. I think clearly the state knows exactly what they're doing. They're locating these facilities in places with lower socioeconomic levels and high levels of minorities. This is what they're doing. This is their plan. They know it. They know exactly what they're doing. And we continue to allow it to happen. So I get it. We would probably lose in court, but it never seems like the other parties ever lose in court, and other people put up moratoriums and they seem to work. So I'll just leave it at that.
Mr. Branstetter,
I don't have anything, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Moss,
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Whalen,
Nothing for tonight, except enjoy the weather. It's very sunny, and hopefully the people are being safe out in the lakes here in Lakewood. So.
well, I'm joining you from foggy ocean shores. It was sunny today, but the fog rolled in. A couple of comments related to things that came up today. With respect to COVID-19 testing, the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department is not conducting public testing. Their initial plan was to rely on the health care providers in the county to do that. County Cares money has financed the acquisition of equipment for 90 multi-care facilities, some of which are in Lakewood, to conduct testing. That should commence shortly and then be expanded potentially to other healthcare groups. The trailers that go around are actually Pierce County Department of Emergency Management. They can handle up to 500 people a day, a unit. And so if you hear about something coming out to Springbrook, that's likely what it will be. Those are free, and there are no requirements of a referral from a physician. So they're open to the public. But those will be, they're almost like they're pop-ups. They'll be scheduled different places around the county. Speaking of CARES money, it'll be a public announcement, but it's public through a presentation to the county council. Clover Park Technical College will receive $750,000 in financial aid money for bridge funding for students who are pursuing a technical degree or certificate that enables them to be better employed. It's part of a workforce initiative in the CARES Act funding from the county. Bates will get $500,000, but that's President Loveday is pleased with that, and hopefully we can help more of those students stay in school and bridge the gap. On Wednesday, I attended as Lakewood's representative, not as a Pierce Transit Commissioner, but as Lakewood's representative, the Pierce Transit Composition Board meeting, which was required to be held every 4 years. There are new legislative requirements as to the allocation of the 9 board slots. The singular change really is that Tacoma gets 1 more spot. They went from 2 to 3. Pierce County will remain at 2. The only thing that was set before we went in really was that Lakewood stays at 1 because we're right on the percentage population wise. The smaller cities lose some representation. So I think University Place and Fircrest will combine for 1. Puyallup and Edgewood will combine for 1, and the rest of the smaller cities in the counties will combine for 1. That's it, except I would note for the record and a point of personal privilege that if you look at our Hollywood squares each week, there's only one person who never has any decorative matter in the background. So maybe we should get our city manager some home decorating literature.
A new graduate from Oregon State's design program, Mr. Confield. She'd be happy to come over and spend your money.
All right. Is there anything else to come before the council?
Don't be a hater, Mayor. Don't be a hater. Go Red Sox. Go Red Sox. Go Cam Newton.
Can't say anything there without being a hater. If there isn't anything else to come before the council, we're adjourned. Thank you.